of training, they went into these large, sophisticated jets and did flying maneuvers that even the most professional flyers have said are impossible for them to do, let alone these people who don't even know how to drive a Cessna. And having a building come down in free fall speed, which implies that there's nothing underneath it, and saying that there's no explosives, and saying a plane that hits the top that can't generate enough heat in order to do whatever they said was going to happen, like it's defying the law of physics. Like if you don't look at that evidence and look at building 7 and it coming down in 7 seconds, not being hit by a plane, and then you have to ask the question, how did that happen? And that's what I'll put to you. Like, I mean, anytime I talk about 9/11, I immediately go to building 7. I mean, there's 20 different impossibilities. Like there's what, 50, 85 cameras were around the Pentagon that the FBI took all the footage of, and they released one set of frames, one picture of the supposed plane that hit the Pentagon, but there's no evidence of any plane wreckage or bodies. And when you superimpose the idea of the plane against the Pentagon, like there's no physical corroboration for where the wings were or the fuselage was, or what happened to the 2 huge engines that are almost indestructible that went into the building but somehow disappeared and wasn't found in any of the wreckage. Like the plane that fell down in the middle of the field where there's no plane. They said it buried itself in the ground and it just looks like a big hole. And they said that this is a plane. Like, these are impossibilities. So just please explain to me building 7. Like, we'll start there.
Okay, since we've moved on to the actual event, let me try to give you a little logic. Sorry, I don't have my tripod today. The North Tower got hit first. It got hit around the 90th floor, and it got hit 16 minutes before the South Tower. The South Tower got hit around the 70th floor 16 minutes later. Yet the South Tower fell almost 29 minutes before the North Tower. Well, what's the difference? The difference is that the South Tower was hit lower. There is much more weight pressing down on weakened steel. Steel doesn't have to melt, but if it softens, it weakens. And these floors pancake down and cause it to collapse first. That, to me, is not a controlled demolition. The tower that got hit second fell first by almost 29 minutes. So that's not controlled. Were there charges in there? I would say that if there were charges and people have alleged that thermite was found in the wreckage, in the rubble, that indeed those charges were sent by the same people who sent the planes in. Now, regarding the hijackers, there are numerous phone calls on record as these planes got lower and they could make cell calls of hijacking, of some killing on the planes, and people acknowledging that they were hijacked. I can't speak to the pictures at the airport, and indeed, it is pretty mysterious. I'm with Elijah. The lack of photographic evidence at the Pentagon is troubling. Yet there are eyewitnesses that say they saw the plane going in. So, and Building 7, it very well could have been imploded. There was a CIA front bank there, and who knows what happened. But the way the buildings fell, with the second building falling first, with more weight pressing down, says to me that indeed the planes did, and the huge amount of gasoline that they carry, did enough damage. There's never been anything quite like this. There have been fires and high rises, but there's never been a plus 500 mile per hour collision that would do some damage with that. It's just never happened, so we don't know. But in terms of experts, they come down on both sides.
Well, okay, can I address some of these things you've said here?
Yeah.
If you have let's say a building, right? I kind of can't see this thing. Okay, so you have a building here, and you're saying one got hit here and one got hit here, and you're saying because of the fires, which I mean, to melt steel is 2,800 degrees. Kerosene burns about 400 degrees. To weaken steel, it has to get to like about 1,100 degrees. So most of the gas exploded outside the building. There was only a little amount that went in, but if you're looking at like, what is it, 90,000 tons, that the amount of fires that were occurring, you're saying melted the steel enough so then the building would collapse in a pancake style. Like that never in the history of our species has a building, a steel structural building, collapse by fire. It has never occurred.
Not just by fire.
Okay, fire and gravity. Like what they are saying is physically impossible because you need to, there's resistance. All of the floors beneath the fires, nothing happened to them. It had been designed to withstand plane hits. It was like 6-inch steel girders in grids that, you know, you just can't set fire to a bunch of office buildings, I mean, office equipment and walls, and think that that is going to be enough to get rid of what is beneath. The only thing that could get rid of it was a controlled explosion because it was almost falling at free fall. To fall at free fall means there is nothing underneath these floors, nothing. I mean, it came down like in first one in 9 seconds, in 10 seconds. Building 7 came down in 6 seconds. The first 120 feet was at free fall speed, even admitted by the NIST examination that they did. So,
excuse me, Elijah, are you saying,
like, just
I'm sorry, are you saying that building 7 was a free fall, or that the
120 feet, the beginning, like it came down in 7 seconds, but they admitted that the first 2 seconds was at free fall speed. That was even in the NIST document. So no plane hit building 7. You're even admitting, you said it could have been imploded, but if building 7 was imploded, how did that occur? Like, how do you have an imploded building, 2 planes hit over here, and you're saying building 7 might have been imploded?
Correct.
That means
I don't have an explanation.
Prior knowledge. That means that someone had gone inside and set the explosives because they knew ahead of time that building 7 was going to come down. The building had been evacuated. There were people on a phone even having a countdown, 3, 2, 1. There's all of this footage of people saying, well, they're about to bring it down. They're about to bring it down. So how did they know that it was about to come down?
Okay.
I cannot explain building 7.
And another thing you said about
I admit that.
the phone calls in that flight, it was physically impossible in 2001 for cell phones to communicate with the ground. It was not possible. They tested it afterwards, and the highest you can go is 3,000 feet. Anything over 10,000 feet, it's impossible. And at 500 miles per hour because of the way the cell phones go from tower to tower. So wherever those phone calls came from, it wasn't from that plane.
So you're saying that planes hit the building at all?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that he was mentioning the phone calls, and the phone calls, it was physically impossible to get a cell phone call in 2001.
Okay.
They've proven that.
Whew, okay.
Maybe at 30,000
The phone
feet,
calls, where did
but these planes dropped down very low. And the first calls, actually, there was a call from a stewardess when the first incidents allegedly happened. And they certainly had ways to communicate to their headquarters from a plane.
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would explain that.
What you're saying involves even more and more people and more risk. And there's a lot of people who who said they talked to their loved ones before
I know, but
they
it was
disappeared.
physically
And
impossible.
speaking of saying no plane went into the Pentagon, where's the plane? Where's the pilot? Where are the passengers?
Well, exactly. I mean, both of those planes, you have to ask that question. But just because you can't figure it out doesn't mean it didn't occur. You have to look at what actually physically happened, right? Like a physical, like there was a hole that was in the Pentagon. When it had breached the walls, it created this circle hole in the back. And in a plane, the fuselage in the beginning is hollow. It's the easiest thing to get destroyed. So as soon as it hits that building, the nose is just going to disintegrate. But it went through all the way into the building, and then out the other side, there's this round hole. And if you're looking at from the side, the camera angle of the footage they had, there's a plume. There's no picture of the plane, and then they have the explosion, the only footage that they have. And so again, it's like it's impossible. There's no plane, so it was like a missile or some sort of smaller object that hit the actual place in the Pentagon that contained the accounting papers for the $2.3 trillion that Rumsfeld the day before said, oh, guess what? We've lost $2.3 trillion. And isn't it amazing that this plane does this massive dive, a circuit that no one said could be done by an amateur, hits the bottom instead of the top of the Pentagon, right at the place that had the actual evidence of the $2.3 trillion. You know, wow, how did that happen?
That is a bit of motive. There's no question about it. But there are eyewitnesses who said they saw the plane go in. And if you're telling me this plane was diverted and the crew and the pilots were murdered, it just, the plot keeps getting bigger and bigger. And you know, I just have a tough time with
but the thing about the big
that being something that anyone would risk without knowing how it would turn out.
They're not risking, if you're involving the president, the vice president, all the intelligence agencies, and you're involving this core of people, you're not at risk. I mean, Rumsfeld and Bush, when they were brought in to testify, it was off the record, it wasn't available, whatever they said, you could not access.
Well, I'll agree with you that our government is not trustworthy. They lie all the time. I'm just going on common sense, reasonable reports, and I don't see a controlled implosion for the two towers. I am unsure about 7, but my biggest problem is where's the plane, where are the passengers?
No, but if you look at other buildings that have been set on fire, they burn forever. They don't topple over. When you look at controlled explosions,
well, they're designed not to topple
at a speed that you can't imagine. So what do you mean you can't understand? Like have you ever seen a controlled implosion? Like, have you seen a building come down?
There's never been anything like this occurrence. This is not a typical construction, and none of the buildings that in history that have had fires, they weren't hit by planes loaded with jet fuel. This is a unique occurrence. So I'm not concerned about it hadn't happened before. It hasn't ever happened in the way that it did. So
I'm sorry, David, but jet fuel does not burn at high enough temperature to impact steel. Like it's 2,800 degrees and 1,100.
Well, the jet fuel was not all that caught fire.
I know, but office furniture.
The whole building.
Office furniture.
Say that office furniture burning.
The building caught fire too.
Drop 80,000 tons of steel and concrete. Like the building was built to actually withstand planes. Like a plane hit, like if you go up here and you hit this, like how would this whole thing collapse because some bits and pieces up here were on fire?
Well, here's what I'll go back to. Building got second, hit second, lower, fell first. There are experts on both sides who say, yes, it happened that way. And there's people who think that's a bunch of bunk. I watched, live. Common sense just says to me that the tower falling first that got hit second had more weight on softened steel. Steel doesn't have to melt, but we can go back and forth with the details of the collapse and what happened. I grant you the photographic evidence at the Pentagon is weak. The eyewitness evidence at the Pentagon is stronger.
Okay. What about the explosions? What about the explosions before the plane hit in the North Tower in the lobby? Where
yes,
they have,
I will say that there are also, I'm sorry to interrupt here, but there are also eyewitness accounts of explosions in the building. So I think if we're going to wait eyewitness accounts, then you've got to, people are going to tell their versions. So we definitely heard people live saying, I just heard an explosion go off in the building, and it was before it collapsed. So, it was really scary. I listened to it.
They heard the explosion, as you just pointed out. They heard something explode, whatever it was. But the building didn't collapse that second, apparently.
No, but this is before the plane hit. So if you're saying that the reason the buildings came down was because the plane hit, like, where did the explosion come from? How did that occur?
I don't know what was in that building. I can't explain that level of detail without spending a year studying everything about it.
The Port Authority owned those two buildings, and the buildings were actually a financial hell for them because they were filled with asbestos. And in order to upgrade the buildings in communication and electrical and all the things that needed to match the new buildings coming around, because it was actually outdated, they had to do major renovations, which cost hundreds of millions of dollars. It would almost cost $1 billion, I think, to actually remove the asbestos that was in there. So they had this horrendous thing on their hands. Larry Silverstein comes along and buys the building from them and puts on a terrorist insurance, which he later claimed for $4.5 billion.
Sure.
That seems also a little
I would, if I had bought that building
that were filled with asbestos, they knew that they weren't going to be that they have to invest all this money to make it better, and then he actually puts a terrorist insurance that later claimed for $4.
Well, I think if you bought the building, if anyone with a brain bought the building and was aware of it was attacked by terrorists in 1993 with a truck bomb, that you indeed would get terrorism insurance if it were available.
Well, I'm just saying that to buy the building that is a financial horror show, that why would you buy it unless somewhere in the back of your mind you had a way that you went, oh, I'm going to do well on it. And that, like, I'm just saying, it's just curious that he buys the building, within 2 months of it going down, and has the terrorist insurance, and all of a sudden walks away with $4.5 billion.
Well, that he made a good decision because the building was attacked. Why, if your building's attacked by terrorists, why wouldn't you insure it against it being attacked again? That I got to throw out as being not motive, just common sense, financial logic.
Okay. I mean, it just seems to me that most of your arguments are based upon you can't believe because they would, be indicted for murder, or you can't believe because of there always be included in it. You just can't conceive of that. But the whole idea is these certain things actually occurred. That's independent of your opinion or evaluation. Like buildings did get hit.
Then I'll go back to the history of the United States and the Middle East and the history of jihadists, for lack of a better term, fighting back. They've been fighting us for a long time, and frankly, they have every right to fight back. And they tried to blow this building up before with a truck bomb. So I don't think it's a stretch to say they would do something else as what happened on 9/11. They had motive forever.
If I'm not mistaken,
We
correct me
agree
if
on
I'm
that.
wrong here, but the bombing in 1993, wasn't it found later that Henry Kissinger did have some sort of involvement in that? And that's why he backed out of leading the investigation for 9/11? Now, I'm not trying to throw out conspiracies here, but pretty sure.
I don't know.
I mean, just because
I certainly don't think that's proven.
Mhm.
there seems to be a historical sequence of events that the United States is involved in, where there's false flags are very much a part of before entering a war. And if you look at who benefits, like you have to pretty much look at Israel and look at, the countries that were invaded were all sort of Muslim countries, enemies of Israel. And if you look at the relationship between Israel and the United States, there had to be a combination of the CIA, the FBI, and the Mossad to do this. And to me, it was like the most sophisticated sort of plot, but it's just fallen down in so many places. But what they do is, again, it's the big lie, and then they use the media, and then you just repeat. And they say if you say a lie long enough, it becomes a truth. And so
again, motive for the Israelis to attack their number one benefactor, their sugar daddy.
It's not a question of Israel attacking the United States.
Weak.
It's a question of attacking, blaming it on your enemy, so that then you can go attack them. That's the whole purpose of a false flag.
That's a false flag. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if it happened.
Well, you haven't given any evidence that it hasn't.
I think I'm seeing that there would be more.
We disagree on the basis
of a I don't know, it's just based on opinions to me. If you believe that the government just can't lie about this, there's just no way, because they would face prosecution. I just don't see that. I've never seen any government officials prosecuted for lying about going to war in any other time. So I just don't see why we would expect that to happen in this case.
Going to war against someone else versus going to war against your own citizens and killing 3,000 of them is a little bit different.
But governments are basically responsible for more deaths than anything combined. You can gather up all the murderers in the world of all time, and government will still come out number one. So, and most of which are on their own people. So, I mean, we've seen this over and over again. So why would that be so unbelievable in this case?
Well, those who are accused certainly had motive. B, my arguments are real simple. I think the risk of doing a false flag operation was way too huge, because you didn't know if the towers were going to come down. You didn't know if any of this was going to work out. And you're risking so much for the unknown. Elijah makes many good points, and I can't argue. Well, I can, but I'm not going to go back and forth about the physics of it all, because experts also are split on whether it could have happened or there was explosives. But one thing seems clear: if one building fell 29 minutes before the other, that's not a controlled implosion. Now, if there were explosives in the building, were they heat sensitive? Were they triggered by fire? Because no one is going to blow one building up and hang around for 29 minutes to blow the other one.
No, but that again doesn't make sense. And if you're looking at the time difference between the two buildings, and you're still looking at the cause being fire and gravity, and you're using that as an example in terms of how it could be a controlled demolition, that's irrelevant. The controlled demolition is going to be linked into whoever presses the button, and they're going to come down whenever they have the apparatus for bringing it down. It has nothing to do with what level they hit and who, there's no connection.
Don't you think that they would implode them both at the same time and make their getaway?
Make their getaway? I don't think.
Well, I threw that in, but if you're going to explode the buildings, are you waiting around 29 minutes?
Who knows? I mean, maybe they had a sandwich, but I mean, I don't think that's an argument. I mean, the main argument is the physics of how a building can come down. And you can't, you have given no evidence to contradict the fact that no steel story building in the history of humankind has ever come down to fire and gravity. It's the first time in the NIST, they say, we come up with a new way, and this is how it is. And it's, we've never done this before. And yet they won't share any of their computer generated simulations to scientific validation. They said
first
it
of all,
happened this way because of this, but they won't give it up to the architects and engineers to actually look at it to see if there's any scientific validation to it. Why?
Well, I think that's a false premise. I just don't agree that it's saying it's never happened before is proof of anything, because nothing like this has ever happened before. And this building had a very unique exoskeleton construction. And the buildings that were on fire were not hit by objects moving at over 500 miles per hour. So I think that premise that it's never happened before is not valid.
Well, I think the point is just that you're using fire and gravity as the reason it came down. And I understand, yes, let's say nothing had been hit by a plane at that height, but it's still like if you're using fire and gravity as your reason for a collapsing building, that bringing up the point that no buildings ever come down because of that, it's has a lot of strength.
Okay, I think you guys both made your point on that. So I would like to move on to the aftermath. Do you feel that, David, do you feel that the responsible parties have been held responsible? Held accountable for?
Now that's a great question, Keisha, because George Bush allowed most of the Saudis to leave the country two days, I think on 9/13, probably for their own protection, allegedly for their own protection. But that, there could be more Saudi involvement than we know. So, and in terms of who was behind it and who we went after, that's a tougher one because there's a lot of lying going on. But I think the motive certainly was with Islamists or jihadists. We've been, I've established that, and I don't think Elijah disagrees that we've been over-involved and intervened and overthrown, and we've basically been a big bully.
Yeah.
And the Arab world has fought back, or at least the Islamist world has fought back with our embassy attacks, our barrack attacks, attacks on the USS Cole, attack before on the World Trade Center, which if Kissinger was involved, I have no clue about that. But so there's motive, there's past history, and there's the buildings not falling at the same time as if it were a controlled implosion. There's a lot of things that, that are difficult to explain, especially the lack of photographic evidence at the Pentagon. A few parts were found I mean, planes fly because they're ultralight, and if they run into reinforced concrete, they're going to basically disintegrate. So there were a few parts, there were eyewitnesses, but I'm not here to make anyone wrong. I'm just saying this is my observation.
Absolutely.
And I love talking about it. And I would just like to say one thing totally off the topic. It's more about how we talk to each other. And there's a bad habit in our world these days to demonize and dismiss. You're A, so you're an idiot, and we can't believe anything you say. You know, I have Republican friends, conservative friends, and I listen to them and I give them my ear and I give them consideration. And I just hope that everyone stops doing the demonize, oh, he's this, therefore that's nonsense. Let's give people respect and talk as Elijah and I are discussing calmly and logically. It's actually enjoyable. And I so appreciate you, Keisha, for putting this together.
You know, there was a thread that actually motivated me to do this that you were a part of. When someone, not going to mention any names, someone we have a mutual friendship with, actually came into my thread and basically said she was embarrassed for me and that I turned into a full-blown conspiracy theorist just because I question official narratives, because that's really all I'm doing. I'm not, you know, going down these rabbit holes and, you know, claiming that lizards rule over us or anything like that. I have legitimate questions, and by just bringing them up, you know, I get called names, and I just feel like we do need to stop this. So I'm going to start having way more debates. I'm going to schedule these on different topics. I want a diverse group of people to just start talking and listening, because I think that's really important. And I'm so glad you guys agreed to do this.
So can I answer that question?
Yeah, it's a ton of fun to discuss things, and it's been an evolution for me just to first erase the insult and stop the insults and not allow people to anger me and raise my blood pressure. Yeah. And I've gotten through it all, and I think there's something about, you know, social media that we're not sitting next to each other. At the bar, we'd be a lot more respectful.
Right.
Because someone might point this.
Yeah. You had a question, Elijah?
You know, Elijah makes great.
Well, I haven't been able to answer your question in terms of the aftermath. Mm-hmm. There was a curious, I guess, scenario that happened that 5 Israelis were found to be dancing on a rooftop of a van as the buildings were coming down, and they were filming the buildings coming down. And they seemed to be rejoicing in what they were seeing. And they were later picked up and they were sent back to Israel, but they weren't questioned and weren't part of the investigation. But it's one of the, again, sort of anomalies that are within the information and the data of going like, how did they know it was going to occur? Why were they being so joyful? And this kind of leads into, you know, well, what happened afterwards in terms of they said that bin Laden was the culprit.
Okay,
just let me finish. Almost immediately. And then they were trying to find him, right? He was hiding in caves, and then he was hiding somewhere else, and he was giving these videos out, and he seemed to be getting younger and younger in each video. And then they finally found him, and then they killed him, and then they dropped his body off in the ocean, and then the Navy SEAL team that killed him actually disappeared. So every rabbit hole you go down in 9/11, you come to a point that doesn't at all connect into the official story. And so the reason I'm asking about these impossibilities is that if you don't address the impossibilities and you brush them off or say we can go back and forth, it doesn't make sense to me. It's not a question of going back and forth. Unless you can address the impossibility, then you don't have the right assessment. And what we're debating here is, what is the right assessment? What actually occurred? What does the evidence, what do the facts say? And if you don't
Well, five
refute
Israelis on the roof of a building who might appear to be dancing or might be freaking out and jumping up and down, regardless of what those 5 people did, it doesn't prove anything. It's an interpretation of seeing people jumping up and down. Oh, they were dancing and celebrating. Maybe they were, maybe they were just freaking out. I don't know, but it doesn't prove a government's involvement, because there were, 5 Israeli nationals.
they were later
appearing
interviewed on Israeli TV and on TV in Israel talking about it. It's not a question of whether this thing points to them and says, no, that's irrefutable evidence that that is occurring. It's just what I'm bringing up are a number of different points. And as you bring up each point, you assess, how much sort of credibility it has in regards to the whole idea you're looking at. And to me, if the vice president is told, hey, there's a plane that's about to hit the Pentagon, and he says, okay, and he says it's 30 minutes away. Do we do anything? No. It's 20 minutes away. Do we do anything? No. If we do, it's 10 minutes away, 5 minutes away. And the vice president and this plane is, or whatever it is coming at the Pentagon, and he doesn't even say do something. Again, it's like, what are these? Well, come on, like, aren't?
All right, Elijah, let me just have you sum it up. Who did it?
It was an inside job by a combination of the intelligence agencies, probably a smaller group of people in power, and they did it in order to create the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya and everything else, and to introduce the Patriot Act and to bring in, sort of lawful measures where they can have more control over their people and start wars.
Okay.
It's the same group of people. I call them the freaking nutballs. Same group of people for hundreds of years, multiple generations of families, create these wars that we get involved in, and they benefit from them, and the rest of us just all, are left, like countries are left in ruin.
Elijah, I'm not going to argue with you, because frankly, our government has lied so much for so long that, I would not say that your theory is impossible. You've heard my doubts, but look, going all the way back to JFK, a lot of people don't know the Zapruder film you saw was manipulated and changed the Sunday after the assassination in the U.S. laboratory at Kodak Labs. It was not the real film. So we've been doing bad things. We've been manipulating evidence. The Gulf of Tonkin incident is another example. So I applaud your doubts. I don't agree with, your logic, but I can't disprove it. So good on you for having doubts. My take on it is they were asleep at the wheel. We got hit. They took advantage of it. But, good for you, on doubting everything.
Just want to bring up, when you talk about evidence, one of the things that had me confused was why they would clean it up so quickly before they were able to assess the evidence. FEMA had a team that wasn't going to be able to be put together for a month to examine the evidence, and they came in and rushed and cleaned it up. So that was suspicious to me.
Yeah, I agree. They cleaned up the OJ murder scene way too quickly. And things happen that certainly create doubt. Now, whether they prove anything is a different discussion, but plenty of doubt. I mean, there's just plenty of doubt here. Building 7, I have no explanation for. I need to study it more. Why there isn't more photographic evidence at the Pentagon, I have no explanation for. But at the same time, people who say it was a false flag and a plane didn't hit the Pentagon, we're really getting in deep that we would take a plane full of our citizens and somehow make that disappear. It's not impossible, but it's a little too risky for me to think that anyone would try to pull it off.
They call it Operation, I think, Northwood, where they've actually practiced replacing a plane with a missile and then going forward with whatever they want to do with it. I mean,
again, it's possible. I agree, and I applaud your doubts.
If they kill 3,000 people and all
I just don't see it that way.
a
But
whole plane of people,
it sure is interesting,
right?
Yes, this is very interesting. Well, I posted a link here for the architects that are calling for more a deeper investigation. There are over 3,000 of them, scientists and architects, that claim that there's no way the official story is right. It's just not accurate. So they've got tons of evidence on there, or really just a lot of things that you can look at and maybe learn something. Or, you know, if you have a link, David, please go ahead and provide it too. I'll post it in a forum. And here is also a link for some feedback for any, if you guys want to. I'll also post this on YouTube. I think I missed the first 5 minutes, but if I can't get this from Zoom, I'll go ahead and post my the recording that I have on my hard drive on YouTube.
Okay, this has been great. I got to show you one thing before we're done.
Sure. Oh!
My baby.
Hey, the next meeting shouldn't be virtual then. I need a real life.
Hey, it'll be ready. It'll be ready about 6 weeks.
Wow. Awesome.
I'm an indoor farmer.
That is
Well,
beautiful.
David, I'd just like to thank David for this interaction, and to thank Keisha for arranging it. And it's been most enjoyable. Hope I didn't get too excited, and I look forward to another one.
Absolutely. Go to the whole page and vote for what you would like to see the next debate on. If you guys would like to participate in another one, or, you know, just vote.
I would love to. And probably Elijah and I would wind up on the same side of our military and the industrial intelligence complex is out of control in this nation. And we need to get control of that. We are fighting all over the world, and that's not the will of most Americans.
Right. Most people in the world, most people do want peace. And I think the only thing that can change that is for people to start putting their arms down and just refuse service. I don't see how else that's going to happen. But that would definitely be a good one for the next debate. But if you guys want to suggest a topic, or you know, just vote on one, please go ahead and do that and share the link. I'll send you guys the link to the YouTube video as soon as I get it up.
Okay. Thank you so much again, Elijah. A pleasure. Hope we talk again about more interesting topics.
Thank you both for taking the time out of your Sunday to join me in this, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and the Bears won, and I didn't see it. They came back.
Oh,
Hey,
oh,
we're 3-0.
wow.
All right, well, thank you again. This was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. And Keisha, thank you for the work.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It was my pleasure. And thanks for anybody that joined in. And Laura, I did see Laura. Thank you. And I will see you guys next time.
Thank you, dear.
You're welcome.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.